Okay. So I want to talk about something that has been going on in my life recently that I feel like I need to make a video for. I just feel like it's going to be easier to talk and gesture about what's going on. It's about being trans and going to school and how all of that has affected my schooling and things I've dealt with. And I want to just share those experiences with everybody. I don't normally make videos, but we'll see how this goes. So, wow, my hair is like flying everywhere. Ridiculous. Basically, when I first started coming out to myself, I had stopped going to classes because I wasn't comfortable with my body, and teachers using my birth name or whatever. It was a disaster. Like, I was failing. I wasn't going to graduate high school. I wasn't gonna go to college. I wasn't going to do anything. So this whole big fiasco goes down, and I end up where I am now / again at the technical college. And when I started there, I decided that it would be a fresh start, that I would use the name I'd been going by for just a few months even, that I would decide. I wasn't ready to ask teachers to use male pronouns yet, because that was a huge step. I hadn't really asked anybody. I was just slowly becoming like gender non-conforming and using a new name that was more neutral. I was going by Indy, and I still do, and that's me basically. And when I went to this new school, I mean, I took huge steps for me, which was even just talking to the school and saying, "Hey, this is my preferred name. Is there any way I can get this on my ID?" And they were like, "Yeah, but it goes in parentheses, which means teachers aren't exactly going to see it. It'll be like first name, parentheses, preferred name, last name." Which means most teachers, when they call out your name first day of class for roll, they're just going to call out your birth name. They're not going to know what that parentheses means, because it's not too common at schools. I'm sorry, I'm on my laptop, so it's wiggling around a lot. Which brings up an interesting point is, the first year I was there, I was not comfortable correcting them. They would say my birth name, and I would raise my hand and respond, and then I'd tell them, but I prefer what's in parentheses, which is Indy. And that was good, and they all agree, and they call me Indy, and that's what they knew me by, and that's great. But what I've noticed recently is coming out to my teachers before classes start, which for a lot of people is a big deal. It's emailing them and pre-classes, pre the quarter starting, and saying, "Hi, like, my name is Indy. I'm trans. I use male pronouns." This was a huge step for me that I only started this year, when I started back as a college student and not just a high school academy student that my school does. And so what I've noticed is I pass decently most of the time. My voice is a dead giveaway mostly, and generally I do okay as far as other students go and stuff like that. What else I've noticed is that teachers, the ones you expect to be okay with it, like, won't. And then the ones you're like, well, this guy might have a problem with it because, he's 75 and ancient and old and white, and you're like, oh God, like, I'm going to talk to this guy and he's just going to be confused. He's going to be so confused. And that teacher for me has ended up being the best. Like, he goes out of his way to use male pronouns. It's kind of cute, actually. But that's besides the point. Like, the teachers you think are going to be weird about it aren't. And the teachers you think are going to be okay, like my Photoshop teacher, who seems very up to date on social things and stuff like that. It's not that she's not okay with it, because for schools they kind of have to be in some ways. It's that they just don't pay attention. I emailed her pre-classes starting and let her know, and then when I went to class and she was calling roll for the first day, she called out my birth name, and for once I took the step and I didn't raise my hand. I just stood and stayed quiet. I didn't say anything because I did not want to be recognized by my birth name in that class at all. I've kind of hit the point where I'm very done with that name. I'm very done with being recognized as that, and I'm ready to move on. So she calls out my name, and I wait until class is over, and I go up and I say, okay, you did call out my name. I am here, but I do not use that name. I go by Heath. That's what I've been going at school because it's far more masculine, which hopefully gets me recognized, which it has. It's been really great, and I love that name. That's going to be my legal name. And so she says, okay. So she crosses out, my birth name and writes Heath. And 3 weeks go by, and she's still using female pronouns. And I think to myself, like, okay, so she hasn't really read her email. She says she checked it, but she hasn't at all. Like, I think if a teacher had checked that, she would know, or she's ignoring it. She's uncomfortable with the idea, so she just decides to ignore it instead of talking to me. So these 3 weeks go by, and the more I'm in class and the more she uses female pronouns, like, to the whole class, like, to me, and I can't, I'm still not at the point where I can correct her publicly. Like, that sounds like calling out my teacher, and that's something I'm not cool with, and, like, I don't think you should be afraid of that, but I also think if you're trying to pass, in some ways you just ignore it, because, whatever, I'm used to it, whatever, but, you probably shouldn't. You should probably, the first time they misgender you, I've learned I should have just talked to her, because what happens, and I think this happens to a lot of trans kids, is they start getting misgendered or misnamed, and it makes them so uncomfortable they don't want to return to class. And that builds anxiety, and it turns into a death trap of, well, why didn't you go to class? Well, I was being misgendered. Okay, well, why don't you talk to your teacher? Well, I'm afraid they won't accept me. And you're like, okay, that's great. And then, but what happens is you start missing more classes, which means you miss a class, and you think, oh God, I missed all this work. So you don't want to go and talk to your teacher again, because you think, okay, well, they don't accept me and they don't like me, and that means I can't ever talk to them. Like, it just builds up, and you're like, oh God, I can't do this, I can't do that. So you start missing more classes, and that's how you start failing. So, the first thing to learn is just fucking try and talk to them, because it's so goddamn hard, and I know, and I get that, but if you do, it's going to end up out a lot better. Anyways, so this is my 4th week. I only have classes 2 days a week, but I missed all of last week with her because of this, because she kept misgendering me, and I had other things to do, and I was like, well, I don't gotta go to class, like, why would I go somewhere where I'm uncomfortable? I'm tired of putting myself in places where I am uncomfortable. And that's great, and then I get here today, and finally, I get a chance to talk to her about the classes I missed. I told her I was sick. She's been super accepting about that, and then she looks at me and she goes, well, I noticed your name hasn't changed on my roster. And I said, no, that's my birth name, my legal name. That's not going to change until I get it legally changed, which I haven't. And for some reason that clicks with her suddenly that I'm trans. Like, she still hasn't read my email, which is so frustrating. If your teachers don't read your emails, just try to talk to them, because I think that's going to be your best option. But so it suddenly clicks with her, and she's like, oh. And she's like, well, do I use male pronouns with you? And I was like, thinking it in my head, I'm like, finally, fuck, oh my God, thank God. Like, yes, you do. And this was like just before in the class, she used female pronouns, like in a 5-minute long conversation with me and the whole class, like using me as an example with female pronouns, which is awful. And I think she kind of felt bad. And then so she's just trying to be friendly, and then she says something like, well, there are other students that I just don't know. And so trying to be kind of educational and help her out, maybe help out some of the other students, I said, well, you should ask. Like, just ask your students. And she's like, but I just want to know. And it doesn't work that way. Like, I'm sorry, when you have, most of your class is going to be cis, and you're going to be able to assume their gender, and that's awesome. And while you should never assume someone's gender, you have to realize that in a college class like this, like, you can. There are people you're going to be like, wow, they're very masculine, they use male pronouns. The general public isn't that educated yet. One day, maybe, but today is not that day. Which means you have to realize that if you're gender nonconforming, I don't think you would be offended if someone asked your pronouns. I think if you're gender nonconforming in any way, if I use a masculine name, but I still look kind of female, then people are they're gonna want to ask, they're gonna be confused, and I think that's great. I think most trans people, most gender non-conforming people are going to be so excited that you even asked, which is why I don't understand the theory that, like, oh, well, if I ask, I might offend them. Like, no, they're going to be excited if you end up asking a cis person their pronouns and they're like, well, I'm obviously a dude, so duh, then whatever. So you ask a cis person and they're going to be like, great. I honestly, I don't think there's going to be any cis person you ask that's going to be offended over that, and if they are, chill. Like, I think you're not going to ask extremely muscular masculine dude what his pronouns are, so the chances of him going off on you and freaking the fuck out are so low. So just ask. Like, as teachers, like, I think if there's a student you're unsure, you should ask, because otherwise we're going to end up with these high rates of extremely talented trans students just not heading to class. Like, I didn't. And that's going to ruin their grades, and they're going to drop out, and it just doesn't go well. Like, if you just fucking ask to make someone more comfortable, I think it's going to end up a lot better for people, and I don't think anybody should ever be worried about offending someone and asking their pronouns. Because, in fact, by asking, you're going to make them more comfortable. Like, wow, this person respects me and wants to use the correct pronouns instead of assuming that I'm female. I was going by Heath, and she assumed I'm female. And that does a blow on your confidence and passing and being self and being dysphoric, like, in class. Like, she's constantly using female pronouns and then calling me Heath, and it's like, that's a masculine name. Like, why would you assume that I was female? Because my birth name is. I don't really know where I was going with this. I just really needed to fucking rant about some of this crap. Like, I just don't understand the theory that, oh, I might offend someone. Like, you won't. And being trans in school is all about talking to your professors, and I think I made the mistake of not talking to her soon enough. I emailed her and she didn't read it, and I should have talked to her in person, because apparently that's how she communicates better. And I think if you're trans and as a student, you should really look into that if you want to make yourself more comfortable. It's so nerve-wracking at first, and I get it, and it's hard, but, you know, if there's anything that will help you more to learn and to move on in your future and get that job that you want, it's got to be helped by your classes and talking to your teachers. And it's bizarre, because, like I said, some of them are going to be like, that's great, and they'll go out of their way to use male pronouns or whatever pronouns you prefer, and you're going to be like, this is the coolest thing ever. I've never had someone so excited to have a trans student in their class. And then you're going to have teachers like my Photoshop teacher who are just, they're good-willed, but they don't quite understand until you mention it to them. And overall, I think that's, I don't know, this is just me ranting about school and being trans. I don't normally do videos, but I'm still probably going to post this. Yeah, that's kind of all I got. It's just me ranting about being fucking trans. Weird how I do that a lot. But if there's any questions, like if you need a booster for ideas for writing a letter or an email to your teachers, let me know. I can give you what I wrote to my teachers. It's really simple. Or if you have any questions about how I deal with things at school, dealing with other students, dealing with teachers, you know, don't be afraid to send me an ask. I guess I'm pretty open to talking about these things. I don't know. I just think people should understand that asking someone's pronouns is going to help them more than it's going to hurt them. For that one person, that one cis person that might get offended, there are 4 or 5 trans students that are going to realize that you're a teacher that they can look up to and talk to and say, okay, I can be comfortable with telling this person my pronouns, because at least they're asking. Like, at least they care enough and respect me enough to ask, because they don't want to offend me. So I think it's a big deal. Anyways, I'm rambling again. My ADD is off course. But yeah, like, just don't be afraid to send me anything if you guys need to. Alright. That's all I got.